Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show this evening. Here's the thing. I predicted I'm a little bit ahead of the curve. For years now, I've been on this channel for almost 5 years and going way back. I'm always ahead of these guys a little bit, you know. And I mean, I'm saying it, and then I hear it a year later or a year and a half later, the same thing being said. You know, as they get closer, they can see it. As you move closer to the crisis, I'm able to see what's going to happen better, how it's going to unfold better. Not perfect. You can't be perfect on this, but I get a lot of things right on my track record. Take, for instance, I was saying, like, way back, before anybody else, almost anybody else was saying it, that there's going to be another round of quantitative easing. And this was back way before they even started the quantitative tightening. I said that they'd have to stop and there's going to be another round of quantitative easing. But I also said that they wouldn't call it quantitative easing. I said that they would call it something else. But I said essentially it'll be quantitative easing. Now we're in the middle of the stuff that I was projecting outwards and forwards in way back years ago. We're in it now. We're in it. And the meltdown is actually on. It's starting. Now, what's it going to be like when the meltdown reaches the crisis stage? It's not at the crisis stage. It's just starting to melt down within the center of the core of the financial system, which is the repo market. It's melting down, and there's nothing they can do about it. But they are holding it back to a certain extent as it's slowly growing. The meltdown is slowly growing within the system. They're holding, all they can do is dump money on it and cool it down. It's almost like a runaway fire. They're able to dump enough water on it where it's still spreading, it's growing, but it's not growing as fast as it would be if they didn't do nothing. If they didn't do nothing, it would melt down overnight. They're holding it back, but it's still growing within the center of the very core of the financial system. So we are in the crisis now. But here's the thing. When it hits the real crisis part of the crisis, when everything starts to get out of control for the central banks, and they start to really lose control, and panic starts to set through the system, that part is going to go fast. And what's it going to cause? Are these guys that prep, are they right? Is that what's going to happen? Is everything just going to come to a stop? The power's going to go out, the internet's going to go off, and you're going to be all out for yourself? Well, you know, in a situation like that, gold and silver wouldn't be worth very much. There would be no markets at all. It would just be every man for himself. If a complete meltdown. Is that what it's going to be like? Well, I can't completely rule out that possibility. But I think it's going to be a little bit different than that. I don't think that's what it's going to be like. Now, I could be wrong, but I have a good track record. I'll tell you what I think it's going to be like when the whole thing really melts down. It's going to be a dire situation. It's going to make all of the people on Earth, in every single country on Earth, so frightened that they're all going to want to suddenly prep. They're going to be that scared. Because this is going to be a bad meltdown. And when it really gets to crisis stage, it's going to be bad, severe. We're going to see the corporate bond market implode on itself. The whole thing just basically melt down, and we're looking at probably the stock market falling and the Fed stepping in to try to prop the stock market back up. The Fed will have to start taking actions like the repo action, except much bigger in different other markets. They'll have to start supporting everything. So it's like they're going to have to be an octopus. They're going to have arms out in every different direction into every market, supporting the markets and funneling massive amounts of money into everything. That's what we're going to see. And by doing this, still there's going to be a lot of failures because they can't cover it all. It's just so much. There's so many arms, they're going to run out of tentacles. They're not going to have enough to cover everything. So you're going to see trucking firms go under. Some trucking firms will stay up and running. Some will go under. A lot of businesses are going to go under. Retail businesses, most all of them are going to go under. Everything's going to go under. An awful lot of things are going to go under, and the whole system's going to slow right down. Except there's going to be massive amounts of money being pumped in. In desperation, in the middle of this crisis, the Fed's going to start to step in with, finally, helicopter money. But that's just going to increase or exacerbate the demise of the fiat currencies. So once this really gets going, once the derivatives market starts to melt down, the corporate bond market starts to melt down, the housing bubbles burst, real estate bubbles burst worldwide, all these banks start to get in trouble, the European banking system starts to go down, everything starts to cascade in on itself quite suddenly. This is what's going to generate this fear. And a lot of people that have been prepping are going to say, oh, I'm so glad I got my preps. I mean, there's going to be fear everywhere in the whole world. Everybody's going to be scared. And a lot of people are not going to know if their bank is still open or if it's one of the ones that went down. People are going to start pulling their money out of the banks like crazy because they're going to be scared. They're going to be scared. It's going to be bank runs everywhere. This whole thing is just going to boil down to, in essence, a massive crisis worldwide. Money's going to disappear from the system and being pumped in on the other side. So we're going to see money disappearing with deflationary pressures within the banking system and stuff. And the Fed in desperation at that point, they're going to go into desperate mode, absolute desperate mode. And they're going to be pumping money into certain institutions, the institutions that are, the money that's going to come from the Fed is going to be in these institutions that are too big to fail. Institutions are going to not be allowed to fail. But they're going to have to pump massive amounts of money in. And the smaller institutions are going to go down. So depending on what bank you've got, like credit unions and stuff, they'll be going down. And you're not going to be sure whether your bank is connected to the banks that's going down or not. So that's going to create bank runs. And the Fed is going to supply ample money to cover all of these bank runs. In the bigger banks, even. They're going to cover it. So they got the back. They got the back of Wall Street. They got the back of the big banks. And so there's certain parts of the system. It's like a fire raging. To explain it to you guys, it's going to be like a fire raging through the system, burning certain parts of the system, and then other parts, kind of like when we have a big forest fire, there might be certain parts of town that are selected to get the water dumped on them. But they can't dump water on the whole county. They'll just take the town and try to save the town. The rest of it has to burn. And it will burn. So this is what we're going to have happening within the system. We're going to have them saving certain parts of the system by pouring unbelievable amounts of liquidity in desperation trying to support the Main Street economy too by helicopter money. Right? So money pouring in one side of the system while the other side of the system is burning, the money is shrinking away. In other words, one part of the economy that's not being saved is going to go into massive deflation. While the other side of the economy that's being saved is going to experience inflation. And so it's going to be a tricky thing. And basically what I'm trying to say to you guys is, I don't see this going the way that, where the preppers are going to actually, in other words, not going into a situation where the lights go out, the everything turns off, the everything closes, and basically it's every man for himself. I don't think it's going to go into that. I think it's going to be a little bit different. I think it's going to be more like the whole world turns into Venezuela. You know, for the most part in Venezuela, they've kept their police working through their crisis, through their financial crisis. They've had police. They've also had electricity has stayed on most of the time. Yes, they've had blackouts, but electricity most of the time. They have food in their grocery stores and stuff, but the way it works is, and I've studied the former Soviet Union as well, when they went through their back when they went through the end of the Soviet Union and their crisis. And it looked an awful lot like the Venezuelan crisis. Last night I was looking at a grocery store during the time of the collapse of the former Soviet Union. During the collapse. And inside the grocery store, what they would do is they'd bring in certain items, like they might bring in toilet paper. One big heap of one type of toilet paper. You got no choice. Because that one trucking company stayed open and all the other trucking companies went out of business. Basically. So they get one type of toilet paper that comes in. You know, and then they have one type of detergent, just one bunch of boxes on the aisle, you know, one type of detergent. And when they go down the meat aisle, there might be one type of meat, all chickens, you know. So when they go through the store, it's not hard to choose what they want. They just walk down the aisle and take a chicken, take some toilet paper, and they only are allowed a certain amount, too. This is what they do. They say, okay, you can only have one of each. You go through the grocery store, and this is what it's going to look like. I think our grocery stores are going to stay open, and you're still going to be able to buy stuff, but you're going to go in the grocery store, and instead of like it is now with a million choices, there's going to be like 10 different items in the grocery store. Maybe a big pile of tomatoes, or possibly a big pile of potatoes, bags of potatoes. And you're only allowed one bag per family. So it's not going to be hard to choose what vegetable you're going to have for dinner. It's only bags of potatoes there. You walk to the other aisle for meat, and all there is bacon. A whole aisle of bacon. You take one package of bacon per family. So it's not hard to pick what you want in the grocery store when these type of times hit. But I think the grocery stores are going to stay open. I just think that it's going to be like Venezuela, very limited choices. And you're going to have to make do with what you can get. But, guys, I'll tell you what I think is going to happen with gold and silver. I think because they're pumping all this money into the special parts of the economy that they're not going to let collapse, and they're pumping massive amounts of money in, and the banking system, people are so scared of the banks, they're trying to pull their cash out and everything else and spend it as fast as they can. We're going to be moving into a hyperinflation. And in this kind of a situation, it creates a black market. So I think on the other side of the coin of all this is there's going to be a huge black market that's going to be so big for gold and silver. The black market's going to be so big that the government's not going to be able to control it, because like any black market, it's not done openly. It's all on the QT. It's all quiet, like speakeasies were during the Prohibition era, you know. And so I think a huge black market's going to form for gold and silver and cryptocurrencies, things that are out of the dollar. And I think the price is going to be going up on these things. And this black market's going to be worldwide. Any city you want to go in the world, if you got gold, silver, or cryptocurrencies, you're going to be able to sell it on them, and they're going to be popping up, these dealers everywhere. So many that the government can't control it. They're going to be on every street corner. There's going to be a guy with a scale and a little testing kit to make sure it's real gold and silver. They might go back to like they did back in the 17th century, where they bite it. Or they might have a little press or something to press the gold and see if they'll know. They'll know. These guys will figure it out. How to know for sure what type of gold you got, how real it is, what carat it is, like 10 carat, 12 carat, 18 carat. They'll know, and these guys will be experts. They'll handle so much gold that they'll know exactly how much it's worth and everything else, and they'll just be paying you in cash on every street corner. And this, my dear people, is how the government is going to get your gold. This is how they're going to confiscate it. Because you're going to be living in a world where it's going to be so hard to survive to get the money you need to go to the grocery store and buy that chicken and buy that bag of potato, or I should say bacon, the package of bacon, the potatoes, and so on. They're going to be living in a world where it's so hard to get the money to buy that stuff that you need to survive that you're going to sell gold and silver in order to get the money. And the guy that doesn't have the gold and silver, the guy that's got dollars, I mean, these food items are going to be going up in price so much daily that it's going to be hard for the working man to afford to buy them at all. To get enough food in his stomach even to get to work, it's going to be difficult. This is the kind of poverty we're going to see. So even if you've got a good paying job, your pay scale is not going to keep up with this inflation. The Fed's going to be pumping so much money into these zombie institutions because all of these institutions, all these big banks and everything else, they're all going to be zombies. Zombie banks. And so they're going to have to pump so much money into the system that they're going to be creating this hyperinflation. And this is how they're going to get your gold and silver, because they're going to print so much money, and you're going to need that food. And the grocery stores are still not going to take gold and silver across the counter. You slide it across the counter, and they're going to say, "What's that?" Meanwhile, there's a huge black market for it. On every street corner, you will see signs saying, "We buy gold and silver," when the price gets really high on the stuff. So, these guys that buy it, say you go to one of these guys and he hands you your big brown bag full of $100 bills, and you might have just sold a pair of earrings, and you've got like a wheelbarrow full of money. Quite seriously. And now you can go to the grocery store and buy the chicken and buy the potatoes and buy everything you wanted, You couldn't afford on your salary, because your salary was only like, say your salary right now is like, $15 an hour. Well, say they put it up to $30 an hour. It's still nothing compared to the inflation. But the gold and silver are going to more than keep up with the inflation. So this is how they're going to get your gold and silver, because you're going to need that gold and silver. Otherwise, your stomach's going to go empty like all these people that got their ordinary bank accounts now. And so where do you think it goes? You take it to this guy, and he gives you your wheelbarrow full of money for the gold earrings, right? So now you're scrambling off to the grocery store. Well, he's got your gold earrings. He puts it in a little box, slides it down next to his cash box, and waits for his next customer. They come in, they might have a gold ring. And then the next guy might have another little something of gold, And after a while, he fills that little box full of gold. Fills it right up. Once it's filled up, then a guy from another company that he works for, which is a bigger company again, comes and collects it. And they take it off in a Brinks truck. Right? Now, that company that collects it, they're a much bigger company, and they're not just collecting from him, they're collecting from 10,000 other guys. So they're getting mountains of gold. They ship that gold off to a smelting company, which refines it back down in the 999 bars, right? And guess who the biggest buyer of those 999 bars is going to be? And where do they get the money? Well, the biggest buyer of those 999 bars is going to be the Federal Reserve. And they're just going to print the money. They're just going to print it. As much as they need to buy as much. The central bank, when they want money, they just print it. From nothing. They just print it. They just type it into a computer. And they're going to be the main buyer that's buying from all these little dealerships set up everywhere. All across the country. And so it's all filtering down into their big stockpile of gold behind the door. That's where all your gold and silver is going to go. And they're going to get it all. They're going to confiscate it. But they're going to confiscate it not with a heavy hand. They're going to let you do it. They're going to let you bring it to them. And when this hyperinflation gets really bad, people are going to be so desperate that they're going to be selling heirlooms and everything just to feed themselves. And where's it all going to go? Now see, if the Federal Reserve were to try to get this gold and silver and confiscate it all, there's a lot of gold and silver out there. People got earrings, they got watches, everything, you know. They'd never get it all. They couldn't. If you went from house to house with an army, bust into your house, go through and raid your house and get whatever they could, and they made gold and silver illegal to own, again, like they did back then, they wouldn't get it all. This way, they'll get much more than they ever would confiscating it the hard way. This is like a soft confiscation, where they're going to get it all in the end, but they're going to do it the easy way, where you bring it to them. And they just buy it all with money that they print on a printing machine. And, you know, if you guys think that this can't happen, it's already happening. There's probably a coin shop in your neighborhood someplace, and the guy's buying gold and silver from people who now, at this point, this stage in the game, their credit cards are maxed. They're working jobs, working 2 jobs, and they can't pull it together because things are getting so expensive so fast already, right? And so Martha might sell her earrings at the coin store, and it goes into the little box, and then it goes off to a smelting company. And the Fed's buying gold right now. So the chain is already in place. It's just got to get much more effective. And this crisis is going to push it over the edge and make it much more effective. So that's how they're going to get the gold and silver. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, what's it going to be like for you if you don't have any gold and silver and you're relying on your bank account? You're going to get slowly squeezed. Inflation's going to squeeze you. Wages not keeping up with inflation. Your wages is going to squeeze you. Medical care and everything constantly going up higher and higher. It's going to squeeze you. Everything is squeezing you from every angle. And in the end, it's harder and harder to make that paycheck go from the start of the month to the end of the month, or the week. If you got a weekly paycheck, it runs out before the week is over. It's getting harder and harder to make ends meet. And so this process is already in place. So the way I see this whole thing going in the end is, I see everything staying up and running, yeah. But the net effect of this is going to be a tremendous increase in homelessness. By saying 10 times what we have now is a complete understatement, I think. I think it's going to be massively higher than 10 times what it is now. I think it's going to be more like 1,000 times what it is now. I think whole cities will be established, almost like during the Great Depression when we had Hooverville. Big cities of homeless. There's going to be nowhere to put them. You know? And they're basically just going to be scrounging to try to stay alive, like going around trying to find anything that they can find just to stay alive in these camps. It's going to be like, and there's going to be so many of them, the police can't move them anymore. They're just going to establish a home in certain areas. Maybe next to a major city, there might be a big homeless camp. And it might be, in the end, it might be half the size of the city. You know? And these people in these homeless camps, they'll string power to them. They'll have their own grocery stores, and they will actually establish cities in there. And they will be bringing. There'll be. They'll have stores and everything. They'll be like a small city, but it's all going to be homeless people and basically squatting. Basically, just going in there and taking whatever land, that piece of land that they can find, and pitching their tent, or making a building out of old styrofoam and logs and tree bark and old tires and bottles and tarps. That's what America's turning into. And who was it that said about how if we establish the central banks in the end, that they would end up, our children or whatever would be in poverty or whatever? It was said a long time ago. It was said exactly how it's going to play out. And this is how it's playing out. It's working toward this really fast. And I don't see anything coming along to actually slow this down or stop it. And control will be maintained through liquidity, through money. Because they're not going to go in that direction where deflation destroys everything. They're going to keep the main part of the system, the central core of the system, the big institutions that are too big to fail and everything. They're going to keep all that up and running. And they're going to use the military as an effective tool to be able to maintain control. Military and police forces as an effective tool to maintain control. And they're going to keep the power grid up and running, and they're going to keep essential services there, and they're going to keep the stores functioning to a certain degree. Kind of like the fall of the Soviet Union. They kept the country up and running during the fall of the Soviet Union, but it was hard times for the people, like in Moscow and stuff. And when you get times like this, organized crime just grows exponentially within a country, and the black market grows exponentially. It'll grow so big in the end that the government won't be able to actually put a stop to it. But then the other side of this coin is it's going to actually function to bring them the gold. Because all of this black market is going to filter in gold from every different source, from every different city. It's going to be a highway of gold coming in that they can buy in finished product, which will be bars. And then they can ship them right off to their vault. Easy as pie, with money that they just print freshly. And to them, it's not going to matter. Once they hit a certain point with this printing money business, once they go over the line and they realize, hey, you know what? The debt can never be repaid. We're over the line now. We might as well print as much as they want. They're going to go in it all hog. Because this is what's going to keep them alive. This is what's going to keep them going. This is what's going to feed them. They're going to go into printing it all hog. It's going to be wide open season for printing money at that point, because all caution's going to be thrown to the wind. It's going to be money printing time. And I call that the Great Print. That's what's coming. And they're going to use part of that money as helicopter money. It's going to give them effective control over the masses. That's part of the way that they're going to control the masses. Because they're going to subsidize. Basically, they'll be subsidizing Main Street as well as Wall Street. They gotta hold it together. Because if they let it fall apart, they are going to be done. Everything would just freeze up if they let it all fall apart. They can't let it fall apart. They can't let it fall apart. The more of a crisis it builds, the more of a crisis it grows, the more they're going to react to it. So as the crisis expands from the repo market into goodness knows where it'll go next, they are going to do the same thing they did with the repo market. They're going to control it. But it's going to take more and more and more to control it. And in the end, all caution's going to be thrown to the wind. It's going to be print money to infinity time to control it. That's the only method of control. This is what's going to create your hyperinflation. This is what's going to spiral the world into the whole world looking like Venezuela. But if we study the fall of the former Soviet Union, if we study what's happened in Venezuela, we can kind of paint a picture, like especially like with the grocery stores and stuff. You know, you go in, there's limited amount of items. It's a hard world to live in. But a world where everything would come to a complete stop would be an impossible world to live in. If all the grocery stores actually went completely 100% empty and there wasn't nothing in there and the power grids went out and everything else, it'd be an impossible world to live in. This is a world that's not impossible to live in. It's much harder to live in, and there's much more homelessness. So I'm trying to paint a picture for you guys of what I think is going to happen. It's not guaranteed 100% I'm going to be right. And I want to mention one more thing before we go. This is what I think it's going to be like in most of the world. But there's a few places in the world where I think it's going to be much worse than that, worse than Venezuela. And it's because of the way these countries are structured. One of these places is, I think certain places in Europe is going to be really bad. And certain places possibly in China. You know, I think it's going to be really bad. I think it's going to be really bad in some places like North Korea, you know, or places like that. But they're more in Venezuela and the countries that already have had this. But they're more used to it already. People, you can get, you know, human species is tremendously adaptable to whatever environment. You know, there's Sherpas and stuff that live up on top of the mountains, and they live up in these high altitudes, and they're fine with it. But one of these people that's normally live down low, if you go up there without an oxygen mask, you might pass out and go into sickness, and you might not even recover from it. Where the Sherpa, he lives up there all day, he chops wood up there, he does everything else, and he ain't got no oxygen mask. This is adaptability. Humans are able to adapt to the environment that they're in. People that live near the ocean where they gather sponges and stuff, they learn how to dive down so deep that you'd probably get the bends. You know, if you tried diving like them, they dive with no air tanks or anything, just with their lungs, like I think like 100 feet deep or something. They're adapting to that environment. So, people will adapt. But it's going to be a world that we're not used to. And this is, I think, what we're headed toward. A world that, or the whole world looks like Venezuela. And this is what the central banks have yielded. With a monetary system that was set up wrong to begin with. Especially in Europe. The European Central Bank and the whole Euro project. Oh my goodness, talk about a mess. Listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.